Hey folks, welcome back. So in this lesson, we're going to keep moving our way down our deployment pipeline. And next up is AWS Code Deploy. So we'll just talk a little bit about Code Deploy. And ultimately, in an upcoming lesson, we will walk through how to use Code Deploy. Now, if we look at our diagram, notice that there's another prominent YAML file, and it is called appspec.yaml. And appspec is short for application specification. And this is unique to Code Deploy. And the appspec file, and it is similar to our build spec file, it pretty much tells Code Deploy what and where to deploy. So it's used to manage each deployment as a series of lifecycle event hooks, which are defined in the file. And we will take a look at an appspec file. Ultimately, we're going to do a deployment to an auto-scaling group, and we're going to use a package that contains an appspec file. So we're not going to have to construct an appspec file, but have no fear. We will look at an appspec file just to give you a good idea of what's going on with it. Just like build spec for code build, this appspec file is very important to Code Deploy. All right, so let's proceed to Code Deploy. Let's click it. And we have our big question, what is Code Deploy? It is a deployment service that automates application instances to EC2 and on-premises instances. And this is important. You can also deploy to Lambda functions or Amazon ECS services. What can you deploy? You can deploy code, Java, Python, Lambda functions, web and config files, executables, packages, scripts, multimedia files. Where can you hold these files? You can store it in S3 buckets, GitHub repositories, or Bitbucket repositories. So you can rapidly release new features and avoid downtime during application deployment. So this can all be automated with a stop and rollback capability. Now let's take a look at our diagram and just talk about what is going on here. So let's say we're working as a development team and we're creating deployable content on local machines. And we want to use Code Deploy to deploy our application. First thing we need to do is create our appspec file. And again, we'll take a look at an appspec file coming up here shortly. And basically, the appspec file is telling Code Deploy the deployment actions that you want to execute. We bundle our deployable content and our appspec file into an archive. Just think of a zip file. And we can upload this to S3, we can upload it to GitHub, we could upload it to Bitbucket. So our archive is called an application revision, or simply a revision. So we get our archive into our repository. Then we just tell Code Deploy where our repository is, and the revision is pulled to our deployment group, our EC2 instances, or our auto-scaling group of instances. All right, then a Code Deploy agent on each of the instances pulls Code Deploy to determine what and when to pull from our repository, either GitHub or S3. And finally, our code is pulled down, our revision, and using the instructions in the appspec file, the content is deployed to our instances. Now, let's check out some other details regarding Code Deploy. This is important. Code Deploy, you can deploy applications to 3 platforms: EC2 and on-premises, Lambda, and ECS. And we'll see an example using EC2. Actually, we're going to use an auto-scaling group. Now, our components deployment group deploys a revision to a set of instances. We saw this depicted in our diagram. Deployment deploys a new revision that consists of an application, and we can never forget the appspec file. Our deployment configuration settings that determine the deployment speed and the minimum number of instances that must be healthy at any time during a deployment. Our revision, again, it's a combination of our app spec file and our application files, and of course our application collection of deployment groups and revisions. Now we have a few deployment types. In-place deployment. So the application on each instance in the deployment group is stopped. The latest application revision is installed, and the new version of the app is started and validated. Now you may have situations where this isn't going to work for you. You have to be up at all times. Well, you can do a Bluegreen deployment. Bluegreen deployment for EC2, the instances in a deployment group are replaced by a different set of instances. Bluegreen deployment for Lambda, traffic is shifted from your current serverless environment to one with your updated Lambda function. So again, these are nearly instantaneous switchovers. You're not going to have that extended bit of downtime. For ECS, traffic is shifted from the task set with the original version to replacement task set. All right, so that's our general overview on Code Deploy. Now I'm going to end this lesson here, and we're going to go to split screen. We're going to take a look at some of our prerequisite security settings, as well as an app spec YAML file. So please join me in the next lesson.